Hi. Welcome back and good morning. This session of #Nguyen Saigon and Vietnam, the King's Bastard Sons at Berg Mountain Optional University, we cover the consequences of French imperialism. As strength is little without mobilization and written orders supersede those verbal, mobility without tires and writing without...
Second afterthought. Consequences of French imperialism. We pay wheel taxes to dispose of rubber tires as synthetic rubber vulcanized now satisfies somewhat its demand, making it relatively affordable, but it wasn't always so. The Amazon rubber boom from 1879 to 1912 ended in what's known as the Putumayo genocide, where 9 out of 10 populations extracting rubber were destroyed. The main export of southern Vietnam being natural rubber, many think since it's relatively cheap now it was always, when that's just not the case. Though first used by Mesoamerican cultures in ball games since at least 1650 BC, now Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Cambodia are its leading producers, but Vietnam once was. Who knew when the first rubber orchard was planted in Vietnam, but unsettled land there was the thickest jungles where colonization and land clearance to grow crops, i.e. caoutchouc, was achieved militarily. Until Uncle Ho preventing a second and larger Putumayo genocide, the demand for rubber had long surpassed its supply, where its necessity brought a higher price, further dividing indigenous from colonial. It's not that individual French soldiers or missionaries were to blame, but the colonial system works dividing haves and have-nots further until those who want not unite, noticing systematic indigenous damage from colonials. As strength is of little effect immobile, Henry Ford's 1908 Model T wasn't a horse-drawn buggy, and it required rubber tires, which not until 1909 was rubber chemically synthesized, now making up 2/3 of rubber production. However, at the time of the conflict, dependence on natural rubber was insatiable. As strength without mobility is a moot point, plantation colonies in theory were perpetual in writing, thus rubber needed to erase.
Of everything there is more space and time, where Hercules being Grecian is also yesterday's news, so in order for Newton's first law to prove true we have to be in the here and now. I don't care how strong Hercules was, he's not stronger than I, because he's dead, in theory. The German Blitzkrieg once used horses, but as breeding required wild horse corral and extermination, horses in war became obsolete and cars with the use of rubber tires insatiable. As strength without mobility is a moot point, the Blitzkrieg of France sent its government to Vichy, France, and exiled Henri-Philippe Pétain and the surviving French army to Cochin, China. Kaiser Wilhelm II, having militarily subdued through Alsace-Lorraine its government, soldiers don't have other soldiers, as orders are orders, but not slaves. They were then court-martialed and shot for disobedience. You don't disarm a republic. You redirect it for your benefit. Subsequently, Pétain was ordered to have his men produce more rubber than they possibly, humanly, and realistically could ever. Non-funded and in a foreign land, all Henri-Philippe had was order, so instead of digging trenches they became Plantagenet, clearing fields, planting Hevea brasiliensis, Amazon rubber tree. Having weapons, soldiers just ate, slept, and patrolled, protecting Frenchmen and their associated, which though similar to slavery, industrialization created an addiction to products native couldn't resist. Whereas, sure, there were some French ladies in Cochin, China, but not enough to satisfy armed starving soldiers, having been defeated. Like one who takes the frustrations of the world after work out on his or her loved ones, they would to natives work and bed them without contracts or marriage.
Why? Well, because, in theory, colonies don't need any outside intervention, and perpetual only requiring time for victory. To win, the only question was when. I mean when. No one knows how long men have valued their womenfolk and protected womankind from the harshness of Mother Nature, nor whether if they have men. When order is restored in Vietnam, as though not a majority, the surname like a catchphrase was that of 30 to 39% of registered Vietnamese. We say that because we can only estimate the number of Vietnamese outside Nguyen influence where without as many maternity wards as Westerners are familiar, the art of midwifery in the wilderness was much more readily implored. As Westerners colonized the Amerikas, they couldn't have known how distribution would upset preestablished order, nor could French colonizers know if Nguyen's winning was strategic. Just as we speak English seeing and describing the world through its eyes, so do we record our perspectives in favor of the familiar. Missionaries help starving kids in Africa, but they are only starving because their parents to society proved immoral. We don't really know if Nguyen's won perpetually, since because French relayed their written history to the world from their perspective, that when they distributed firearms to indigenous, if those provided guns should have been, or to what extent those given them were less moral than others. But naturally progressing with time, colonies would have grown to perpetuity with one first lady as horses bred, a new generation would emerge in a state of war.
Francisco de Pina, a Portuguese missionary, developed the Vietnamese alphabet with 29 letters, Romantic in origin, with 22 basic ISO Latin letters and 7 with 4 different diacritics. Further distinguishing it are 5 additional diacritics denoting tone, where the E in Nguyen as the 9th letter of their alphabet has a circumflex above the E and below a tilde. As Ngai means danger in English and N pluralizes it, the circumflex, bent around, coupled with a tilde or titulus, a roundabout, a title of approximation or an equivalency, the Nguyen dynasty learned the art of the written word. French colonies descendants of the Nguyen dynasty may have monopolized Frenchmen and stood between them and others now extinct and, unfortunately, unrecorded. Viet meaning right, NM meaning 5 or man, and Minh meaning bright. Vietun refers to John 1:5, while Viet Minh does so to literature. Thus, Sheng Viet's their voice.
As cars replaced horses, empires without rubber neither could strength be proven. Lead for bullets was also used for writing, where the history of the Nguyen dynasty began with a first lady whose surname was, certainly, Nguyen. Rubbing out others as horse breeders exterminated wild horses. Viet Minh, the Shin Viet, encompassed more than descendants of Nguyen. Not dangerous but bright. The Minh NM were literally bright men, but also from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Minh Nam means, I am a man.
That concludes the information we have for you this session. The importance of literacy as well as war was highly influenced by rubber products, where tires moved armies and erasers rubber danger from the stigma of Cochin China, replacing it with intellect in men more bright, where light in the darkness was by it not understood, from John 1:5. Literate not only encouraged reading but writing, which in doing so, erasers were necessary to rub out danger to replace it with brighter men of intellect. Next session we cover the third afterthought in Vietnam, Nguyen, achieving nobility through war, whereas saying Minh Nam, I am a man, or I am 5 years old, with Minh meaning either bright or I am, and Nam both 5 and man, I am a man and I am 5 years old are relatively the same. Hut colonels don't fight privates nor generals sergeants. We hope to see you there then. Thank you for your time and consideration.